everybody? I hope you're having a great day today. This is Alex from the Fresh Fantasy Podcast. This is the 23rd episode of Season 3. Today we're going to be talking about a tight end deep dive, talking about some of the toughest to rank tight ends in the landscape, talking about guys like Darren Waller, TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, and more, and all of our thoughts on each of these guys. Joining me today to break this all down is a man who is widely considered one of the greatest fantasy rankers of all time, even though he would never admit to it. Formerly of the Football Girl and the Fitz on Fantasy podcast, he is now a part of the second biggest fantasy podcast in the world and is widely recognized for his work and contributions to the fantasy community. He's a Packer backer and a Badger forever with over 43,000 followers on Twitter. Returning to the podcast, he is the talented and amazing Pat Fitzmaurice. Welcome back to the show.
Oh, what a glorious intro, Alex. I got to get you to be my full-time hype man, I think, if I can sidetrack your other career plans, hopefully.
Please.
But always great to talk to you. Thanks for having me back.
No, absolutely. I'm excited to do it. And this is actually the last part of our deep dive series. We've done quarterbacks, running backs. We did 2 parts of wide receivers. You can get enough wide receiver deep dives. But when I was thinking about tight ends, I was like, I have to bring someone that really knows what they're doing, someone that's really accurate in their rankings year in and year out. And I figured this guy with the FantasyPros hat might be a good person to bring on. That's what we brought you on today. But let's jump right into it. And also, before we get into these tight ends for the people, like, you're going to notice that we're not talking about Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews or some of the tight ends that people pretty much universally agree on. I chose 10 tight ends today that are guys that are a little bit tougher to rank and that we're having a little bit more trouble with at the current moment. So we're not talking about the most obvious players like your Kyle Pitts and those guys of the world. So why not start with someone like Darren Waller? Because Darren Waller is someone that is very confusing right now because Darren Waller, one of the most talented tight ends of the NFL, but he's also turning 30. And Davante Adams is also joining this team because, Davante Adams has had over a 29% target share in 4 straight seasons. And Darren Waller, with that, is probably not going to see the same 24% target share and 29% red zone target share that he saw last year. So, Pat, how do you feel about Darren Waller right now? Are you a little bit more worried on him, or do you think the talent is just ultimately going to win out here?
Yeah, so last year, Alex, when he was going typically in the second round of drafts, I thought he was pretty grossly overpriced. And now maybe he's just a little overpriced as a 4th rounder. And you kind of said it going into the age 30 season. And here's Davante Adams ready to claim a massive share of targets for the Raiders. So that's why I kind of think that he is maybe being slightly overvalued. Like, I was checking out Mike Clay's projections on him. Mike Clay's pretty much the projections king. So, I'm very respectful of whatever he puts out there. And he has, for Waller, 69 catches, 886 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think that's reasonable. I'd probably bet the under on yardage because we also saw Hunter Renfrow emerge as this trusted target last year. Yeah. Of course, Renfrow's production spiked a little bit because Waller was hurt. He had that knee injury, and like Henry Ruggs wasn't around after his arrest. So it was kind of out of necessity, but Renfrow showed he's a really good player. So, 2 quality wide receivers, 1 superstar wide receiver to fight for, fight with 4 targets. And, I just think Waller's a bit overpriced, and who knows? We saw him have that I think it was called an iliotial band or a lodial band injury last year, a knee thing. Now that he's hitting 30, we might see more of these little nicks throughout the season. So I'm just a little hesitant, and I don't think I could pull the trigger on him in the first 4 rounds.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And again, we're not hating on the player. We love his story. We want to see him succeed and get, 2,000 yards and 150 catches. But unfortunately, that's just not what's going to happen this year. And I think at his price, he's just a little overvalued. But the other case for him, though, is just the fact that, okay, like maybe you want someone like Darren Waller because this tight end landscape a little bit later is a little bit tougher than it is, I think, in some of these past years where there's some clear breakouts.
Yeah, it's true. We do love this story, by the way. I'd just rather pay paperback prices for the story than hardcover,
Absolutely. That is the best way to do it. But another guy that I think I'm also having a little bit of a tough time in because that this could go so many different ways. And the player is Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz is a very interesting case for me because Dalton Schultz right now has a really clear path to targets where Amari Cooper's gone and he has had a 20+% target share every year in Dallas. Michael Gallup had ACL surgery in February. And usually when that happens, we don't see players come back for about 9 months. That would put him back around week 10 or 11. So those two guys that command a high target share are gone. And outside of CeeDee Lamb, like who else is going to grab, a big target share? Jalen Tolbert, maybe he does, but I think the path is very clear for Dalton Schultz. But, also I think last year he overproduced a little bit when he was just 13th in target share, 16th in target rate per route run. He had the 13th most red zone targets, but I think the other part of that was the fact that he was 5th in yards per route run, so he was on the field a lot more and running a lot more routes, which I think bumped it up. But I don't see why that changes this year in this offense. So even though he's not super athletic, are you in on Dalton Schultz because he's got a clear path to targets, or do you think that without the top tier athleticism that we need, that he's someone that we can't trust as much?
Yeah, you kind of said it, Alex. I mean, it's a conflicting profile with him and having this really clear path to a lot of targets, but not being this athletic guy, kind of generally not the sort of specimen we look for at tight end. But maybe just one of those guys whose production like sort of belies his average, ordinary athleticism. So I don't know. I mean, I guess he's not really a guy I'm chasing. It seems like he is in that clear sort of middle tier of tight ends now. I mean, people are really going after Kelsey and Mark Andrews, and then sort of Waller and Kittle fall in there. And like, he's part of that middle class. And that's generally where I don't like shopping at tight end. It seems like those guys let you down more often than not. And I'm not sure I want to pay like, whatever it is, a sixth round price for Dalton Schultz. So, yeah, man, I mean, like I sometimes don't like doing it based on just how things project. If we're doing projections, yeah, Schultz is going to get this weighty target load. But like, what are the things that could happen to derail that? Maybe Jalen Tolbert's a superstar. Maybe my boy from Wisconsin, Jake Ferguson, who they drafted this year, who's been the Badgers' best pass catcher for the last 2 years, winds up sort of sharing things with Schultz the way Schultz used to share with Blake Jarwin. So some of those things could possibly, be the flaws in the projection for Schultz, and I'm a little hesitant here.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other part of that also, goes hand in hand with that is just the, I think it could be Tyler Higbee syndrome. You know what I mean? Where, it's not the super athletic tight end. He's projecting to get a lot of targets in the offense that he's in. So I think that, Tyler Higbee's probably a fair comparison where they're going around the same range in past years. And people are like, well, he's going to get the target volume. He had some good stretches, but it's the same thing where he doesn't have a great, production profile long-term, and he might have some good stretches and the targets might be going there, but ultimately he's probably not the guy that's going to win you those fantasy championships. We've seen this mold of like your 7th, 8th round non-athletic tight end that's going to get targets every year, and it doesn't usually seem like those guys are the ones that, produce for the whole stretches of the season. But, what about someone that does have a better production profile going in that same range, like a TJ Hawkinson? Because TJ Hawkinson obviously is super talented, but, last year he was 5th in the NFL in target share, and I feel like that could be bound to go down a little bit when, you have Jameson Williams returning at some point in the season. But mainly, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I am extremely high on, is probably only going to command more targets. DeAndre Swift, is still going to command a significant portion of targets. And I don't like him, but, DJ Shark is probably going to, command more targets than, Josh Reynolds would, or some of the other guys that they had at wide receiver last year. So I think that there's a lot more target competition. And to me, it seems like TJ Hawkinson isn't going to be a guy, that's going to win you your league and what's, looking to be a crowded offense. But maybe, there's some comfort in knowing that he's still going to, give you a high weekly floor. So, like, what are your thoughts on TJ Hawkinson?
Right, yeah, he was primed for a big target share. It seemed like last year when the Lions really had nothing at wide receiver. But like you said, Amon-Ra just exploded late in the year. They've since added DJ Chark, Jameson Williams, who's probably not going to be ready for the start of the season, but is going to be there eventually, and Swift, who missed a lot of time. So a lot of targets to be shared in an offense triggered by Jared Goff. So that's kind of an issue. But as you said, he's sort of the anti-Schultz. He's got this, complicated target profile, but high draft capital, really athletic dude. Was a baller for the University of Iowa. I like him, but I mean, maybe when we look back to 2020 and look at his numbers, 67 catches, 723 yards, 6 touchdowns, that might be the ceiling here, I think, barring like some wave of injuries to the other Detroit pass catchers.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. He's someone that I really like, but I just don't know if it's going to be that what we really want from him, and I don't think there's a clear path to him breaking out. But maybe we're saying, okay, hey, Alex and Pat, like you just talked about this with Dalton Schultz, talent maybe does win out here, and it doesn't need to be the projected targets. But ultimately, I think that T.J. Hawkinson, in a certain mold of your drafts is great because he's going to probably give you a high weekly floor. But I don't think he's going to he has a top 3 or 4 ceiling like I think he did last year when they had a lot less target competition. So, I'm willing to draft him in the right mold if I just need a solid tight end that I need, 7 to 10 points from every week. But, otherwise I'm probably going to be avoiding TJ Hawkinson a little bit more. But another guy that's, going as we climb down this ADP ladder that's interesting and is clearly also very talented, but facing more target competition, similar to TJ Hawkinson is Dallas Goedert. I'll let you lead off on this. I led off on some of these last couple. Like, what are your thoughts on Dallas Goedert right now? Where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, he's a really interesting case because for the first time he is going into a season as the clear tight end one for the Eagles, before it was Zach Ertz. And, before, like, very early in his career, it was, like, high-level Zach Ertz. So now Ertz is gone after that sort of early season trade to the Cardinals last year. But, hello, A.J. Brown here to take a significant share of targets in the Eagles. And we saw the Eagles run at a really high rate. I mean, like, man, over the second half of the season, it was like an insanely high rate, over 60%. I don't think we're going to see that. And I think the Eagles knew that wasn't sustainable, hence the addition of A.J. Brown. But we also like, I think, that Goddard is this athletic dude. I mean, he had over 800 yards last year and 14.8 yards per catch, which is pretty insane for a tight end. Like, that's really high. Probably not something that can be replicated again this year. But I also think maybe we see, I don't know, he had 56 catches last year. I think that could possibly go up a little bit this year if, maybe especially if A.J. Brown misses a few games as he usually does. And if the Eagles throw more than they did last year, which I think they will. But, I think his price right now is fair. Like, people would probably be a lot more hyped on him if they hadn't added A.J. Brown. So I think the price has stayed pretty reasonable, but I don't think you're getting a bargain on him either.
Yep, 100%. And I like him, but I think that, A.J. Brown is clearly shown to be one of the best separators in the world. If you look at reception perception numbers with Matt Harmon, he's fantastic. Devontae Smith had very similar things where he's like all the underlying stats that he had a really good rookie year and could be very good this next year. But, Dallas Goedert was super efficient. He was number one in the NFL in yards per route run. He was number one in yards per target. He said he had a 14.9 yards per catch. He was second in target separation, third in fantasy points per target. But there is something a little bit interesting about Dallas Goedert. And maybe this gets negated because A.J. Brown is there. But, over the first 10 weeks when Zach Ertz was there, Dallas Goedert had just 2 games with over 75% of the snaps. And he ran 17 or less like pass routes in 8 of those 10 games. But then once Zach Ertz was gone, in the 7 games that he played after that, he played at least 90+% of the snaps in 6 of those 7 games. And he ran, 19 plus pass routes in 7 of those 8 games. And his pass routes consistently were a lot more in the 20s than they were in like the mid-teens. So he was running a lot more routes, but then once you add in A.J. Brown, that kind of gets completely negated because A.J. Brown is A.J. Brown and they just paid him, 25 some odd million a year. So I think that those numbers are great. He's obviously super efficient, but I think the way this offense is going to look, if we don't see it, like it's not going to be a top 5 passing offense in the NFL. Like they're going to throw the ball more than they did last year, but I still don't think it's going to be enough, to get Dallas Goedert the work that we would like him to see as much as the talent is there. But a guy that, could get, some more targets is someone like Zach Ertz. Obviously Marquise Brown is there now. Hopkins is suspended for 6 games, but they drafted Trey McBride. So how do you feel about Zach Ertz, who's someone that I think has been pretty undervalued the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, we saw him have a really nice rebound season last year after in 2020. I mean, we were thinking that maybe he was washed because he was so bad as far as efficiency numbers. And I know the quarterbacking wasn't great in 2020 for the Eagles. So that's part of it. But, we might have written him off too early because it looked last year like he was fully back. And it'll be interesting because we've got the DeAndre Hopkins suspension for 6 games, and that's going to create some target opportunity, especially since Hollywood Brown is kind of this deeper route guy, a lid lifter, and Ertz is going to be an important underneath target, I think, for Kyler Murray early in the season. They did add Trey McBride, but we've seen we've seen a lot of first-year tight ends, even with draft capital, come in and not do much. So I think it's going to be kind of a red shirt type of year for Trey McBride. And, I don't know how much 11 personnel we're going to see how much 2 tight end personnel we're going to see for the Cardinals from Cliff Kingsbury, which would be really out of character based on, how he's operated his offenses in the past. So, yeah, for now, I think the outlook is pretty good. When Hopkins gets back, things get a little more blurry because I think a lot of Ertz's games last year after he joined the Cardinals were without Hopkins post-injury, and that's when he had some of his most productive days. So I think the price is fair for him. I mean, it's getting into the buying zone where, by the time you would have to make a call on Ertz, you kind of stocked your basket with some wide receivers and running backs already. And I tend to go a little bit later on my tight ends. I don't want to pay for Dalton Schultz. I want to find the next Dalton Schultz.
Yep.
And, generally it's maybe after the Ertz point that I'm buying, but if Ertz is going at a reasonable rate, I'll probably have him on a few of my teams this year.
Ertz is one of the only guys, probably the only guy, in this range from your Schultz, Hawkinson, Goddard, Ertz, and the next guy we're going to talk about. Probably the only guy I'm really buying in this range. I mean, he's been a top 6 tight end in 5 of the last 6 years. But, all these guys that we're talking about, outside of Schultz, that is like the Tyler Higbee mold, Hawkinson, Goddard, Ertz, and Dawson Knox we'll talk about next, are all these guys where there's a lot better players or guys that command a lot more targets ahead of them. And we're just kind of hoping they fall into a lot of touchdowns because they're not going to get the targets that we would like them to get on these offenses. And I'm with you on Zach Ertz. But Dawson Knox is another guy that I don't see myself buying very much of because, he caught a touchdown on 18.4% of his 49 catches last year. That was the highest touchdown rate in the NFL. He was 22nd among all tight ends in target share at just 13.2%. He had just 4.7 targets per game, which was 20th in the NFL. And another note also was the fact that, Josh Allen targeted tight ends at just an 11% rate last year, which is the 3rd lowest of any quarterback in the NFL. So, I mean, I like, the talent in Dawson Knox, but, I think Gabriel Davis is going to be pretty good. Stephon Diggs is going to be good. I like some of the guys they have and the pieces on their roster, but I'm just not, I can't get sold on Dawson Knox, but maybe I'm just hating because he had a high touchdown rate last year. Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I mean, the high touchdown rate, it made him kind of the Robert Tonyan of 2021, where that TD count far exceeded what it should have really been. But I guess the one reason I can maybe talk myself into Knox is that he hasn't gotten crazy expensive as a result of all those touchdowns.
Yeah.
And he's still a very athletic young dude playing with Josh Allen. And granted, you make a great point about Allen not necessarily looking for his tight ends a lot. And part of that is, Knox was just kind of there wasn't a lot of, I can't remember now off the top of my head where Knox was drafted. But it's not like, he was regarded as a super premium tight end prospect before.
He was a 3rd round pick.
He was a 3rd rounder. Okay, that's not too bad. But, yeah, so I like the profile as far as athleticism and playing in a good offense. If the price remains reasonable, I might get back in. I was kind of lucky. I went dumpster diving a lot at tight end last year, and I wound up with a lot of Schultz and Knox in various leagues. Maybe he doesn't equal that touchdown total again. Good chance he won't. But maybe he spikes the catches and yardage a little bit as he grows along with Josh Allen in this offense. So I'm semi-optimistic that, he can have the same sort of value, but more with catches and yardage and less with touchdowns.
Yeah, and honestly, with compared to Hawkinson, Ertz, Dallas Goedert, he might have the easiest path to targets of all those guys. Where he's already done it with the touchdowns, but thinking about it, like Gabriel Davis, and then who after Gabriel Davis is going to be the guy, like Isaiah McKenzie, who doesn't play a lot of snaps every game. Is that going to be the next guy? So I think that he might have a clearer path to targets than we think. So that's pretty. I'm glad to have you on because now my gears are starting to turn a little bit more on Dawson Knox than they did previously. But go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah. And the other, their zone beater last year was Cole Beasley. Like, whenever they went up against teams that were zone heavy, it was almost like the cheat code to play Cole Beasley if you had him, especially in PPR leagues. But, and I know they do have other slot candidates, McKenzie, Jamison Crowder, Khalil Shakir, like all those guys could play slot, but maybe, part of the, since they don't have the pure zone beater perhaps that they had last year with Beasley, maybe like Knox is part of that as a big dude who can just settle into soft spots, get those little 5-yard, 5-yard ins and turn upfield and get yardage after the catch.
Definitely. And but the guy that beyond Dawson Knox that my gears are starting to turn on is Cole Kmet. I've talked about a lot of Cole Kmet on this podcast. Everyone knows that, the Bears lost their 3rd, 4th, and 5th leading target getters. That's 150 targets that are gone already. He was 8th in targets, 9th in air yards, 11th in target share last year. And then everyone knows the famous, he had 94 yards and no touchdowns, but his red zone usage was there. I mean, he had a 19.7% red zone target share last year, no touchdowns. And all his backups scored 6 touchdowns on 34 targets combined. He was just purely unlucky last year. And then when you look at his target competition and it's only Darnell Mooney and Velus Jones, the potential is there for Cole Kmet. But then the other side of that obviously is the fact that this is probably not going to be a great offense that doesn't really score a lot of touchdowns. But I think in looking for a tight end that gets a lot of targets, Cole Kmet can absolutely be that late round tight end that you can get that is almost guaranteed to get 100 targets should he stay healthy. So are you seeing the same thing, or am I getting a little too excited on Cole Kmet?
No, I am, man. I like him a lot too, not just because he's from the village next door to ours up here in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. So, yeah, this is just kind of the things crossing as far as everything lining up. A really good prospect, athletic. The target picture looks great. And, things are kind of lined up for him to have a big year, and the 0 touchdowns is holding down his price a little bit. But I don't know about you, Alex, if you've been doing best balls or anything, but he's not going as late as I thought he would. The best ball rooms are pretty sharp these days.
Yeah, the best ball rooms he's going more around the tight end 10 or 11, it seems like, and that's probably a little bit better to price. Sometimes earlier. I feel like there's always someone that likes him a little bit more than I do that's taking him around tight end 7 or 8 sometimes in these best ball drafts.
Yeah, so it seems like people are on to this guy. I don't know if that's going to be the case in home league drafts in August and early September or not. But, so, and you mentioned the offense is probably going to suck. I don't think he'll get 0 touchdowns again, but I also don't think he's getting 10 in this offense. That's going to struggle to put points on the board. However, though, you said it, Darnell Mooney's the only other proven guy in this offense. There's Velus Jones, Byron Pringle. I mean, the wide receiver room is pretty gross. And so things are definitely there is a chance he could be number 2 on the Bears in targets. And even though we don't like the offense generally, I think we like the talent of Justin Fields. I mean, he's not just a pure running quarterback. We saw him really sling it for Ohio State. I mean, he's got a lot of upside, I think, as a passer. So I'm high on Kmet for sure. I think it's going to be a pretty safe floor just because of the role he's going to have to play on this team.
Definitely. No, I totally agree, and definitely someone that I am buying the most right now among these late round tight ends. I'm curious to hear. We'll talk about some of your other, late round targets right at the end. But the next guy I want to talk about is Albert O. Albert O is someone that is very interesting. I can still barely say his name at this point. I think it's Ukwe I'm probably butchering the crap out of that, but I think that's at least better than I probably would have said it a month ago. But he's someone that's also really interesting where, He's been an efficiency monster, 98th percentile 40-yard dash. He's at 100th percentile speed score, which is, your weight and speed accounted. And last year, he was super efficient. He was fifth in yards per route run, behind Dallas Goedert, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, and Kyle Pitts. And then in OTAs, the beat reporters are saying this guy's taken a huge step this year, and he's someone that's really interesting. But, there also, could be a little competition here. So is he someone that you're targeting in these late rounds, or are you more looking towards other guys?
I've been looking at him opportunistically in best balls. Like I've gotten some of him, but I'm trying not to overdraft him. It's hard, man. You look at those physical tools, like you said, the 100th percentile speed score, and he's 6'6" and 258, and just like this amazing physical specimen. And you saw it at times last year. Like a dude who can do what he can do after the catch is really exciting. This young guy, and he flashed that same sort of potential when he was at the University of Missouri. But boy, the receivers are so good on this team. Like, Judy, Sutton, KJ Hamler, Tim Patrick. Like, there's a lot of wide receiving talent, a lot of target competition here. And they drafted another pretty good young tight end in Greg Dulcich. So, I'm intrigued for sure, but it could totally go any number of ways. Wide range of outcomes here. Like if you get him in a 12-team league, like I think that's one of those rare circumstances where you have to draft like a second tight end.
100%.
Like I would want one coming out of the draft. I don't think I just want to play waivers for my other tight end. I think I'd kind of want another guy there.
Absolutely. But would you be drafting him or someone like Irv Smith? Because, Irv Smith is playing in this, really good offense. It could be similar to a Tyler Higbee type role in this offense. It's not that great, but I think Irv Smith's obviously a lot more athletic. He has a better talent profile than, Tyler Higbee does. So, he could be a better Tyler Higbee in this offense. That is so exciting, I know. But I think that it scares me with Irv Smith because I know that there's a lot of hype around him. He's clearly a very talented player. But I think at his absolute peak here, he's like the fourth option in the offense, behind Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook. Maybe behind KJ Osborne. But I think at best, he's probably the third or fourth option. And I think that just, doesn't sit right with me. But, maybe you think that the talent wins out here. How do you feel between Albert O and someone like Irv Smith?
I'm siding with Albert O for sure. Okay. And you said it, he's probably a fourth option at best in this offense. And you mentioned Tyler Higbee, which is kind of apt because now this is going to be an offense run by Kevin O'Connell, the new head coach, who is a Sean McVay disciple. So like our guy Derek Brown says, mentioned KJ Osborne. Obviously, Justin Jefferson is going to be a target hog. Adam Thielen, we're going to see Osborne on the field more because of all the 11 personnel the Rams are going to run. I don't know if this is as good a situation as some people are going to perceive it to be. And since they're going to be running a lot of, single tight end, if they want a blocking tight end, that's probably not Irv because he is not that big a dude. He's not like Irv Smith Sr., who was a giant dude, who was, I think, a pretty good run blocker back in the day. I don't think Irv Jr. is that kind of guy. So,
agree.
I think maybe people are going to think he's like a sneaky, cheap way to go at tight end, and maybe I like some other guys in that category more.
No, 100%. I'm the same way, and I want to believe the talent is clearly there. And like Derek Brown said, I really, really hope he's not behind KJ Osborne. And KJ Osborne had some solid weeks, but I would love to see Irv Smith break out. I just don't think that this is the team to probably do it unless there's some injuries to happen at this point. As much as we would like to see it, I think Albert O is more of a path to targets at this point. But another guy that's in the same Irv Smith range that I wanted to touch on because he's been getting some offseason hype is Gerald Everett. We saw the beat reporters saying that he's going to get the jet sweeps and these quick passes, and that we're going to use Gerald Everett like a tight end Deebo Samuel or something like that. I don't know if I believe that, but Jared Cook, the last 2 years was the super exciting tight end 17 and tight end 18, and Gerald Everett is obviously more talented than someone like Jared Cook is at this point in his career. But, he's never commanded higher than a 15% target share, in the 5 years that he did, that he's played. And I think the other part of that is that 15% target share came on the slowest offense in the entire league, with the Seattle Seahawks last year, where like if you were getting a target, like you had a high target share. Like they had a much inflated target share, even though the target numbers weren't as much there. So I'm not sure I believe in Gerald Everett, but I thought he was someone that was really interesting to cover here. Do you think there's a stone unturned where he can have a big role in this offense, or do you think that it's just so condensed between Eckler, Mike Williams, and Keenan Allen that he won't ever be able to get anything more than hoping we get 10 touchdowns?
I'm leaning towards the condensed, and I'm not likely to buy just because I think people are going to pump him up because it's a good offense and they've got one of the best young quarterbacks in the game. But I just I wanted to like this dude. So my guy Debro likes him, and Debro is sharp as hell. But I just, after watching Everett the last 2 years, I don't know if he's actually good. Like I've just seen too many times where he fumbles easily catchable balls or doesn't break a tackle I feel like he should break. So I don't know, man. It's possible he does get a weightier target share than I'm expecting and, cashes in that good offense. But I could also see him kind of getting lost in the shuffle. And if I'm going to go for a cheaper tight end, I think I'd rather go for some freaky athletic specimen like David Njoku or even Lord help me, Evan Engram. Over Everett. Yeah, I mean those guys are going to be playing in worse offenses with worse quarterbacks. Presuming we see a suspension of some length for Deshaun Watson. But still, I think I'd rather go for one of those dudes than gamble on Everett.
Yeah, I agree. Before we get into the flag plant, the final question of the day, who are some tight end targets that you're going for? Because we talked about a lot of guys, in the top 20 of ADP, and there's a couple guys that we didn't talk about, like Pat Freiermuth or, Mike Gesicki, Hunter Henry, Noah Fant. Are there any of those guys or other names that you're going to be targeting a lot of, like your Evan Ingrams or David Njoku's? You said that you like to tend to go a little bit more late round tight end. I think we – as we went through this tier 2 of tight end, like the Schultz, Goddard, Hawkinson, doesn't seem like guys that either of us will be drafting. So who are the tight ends that you will be going for right now in your drafts that you're ending up with higher exposure in redraft or best ball?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Fant, and his price has really gotten pushed down. People are obviously very dejected about him being part of that trade and going to Seattle and their gross QB situation. Although maybe that turns into Baker Mayfield in the coming days or weeks. And Fant, it's not like Fant has gotten good quarterback play so far in his career. He's kind of been tethered to Drew Lock for a while now, and so the guy's still insanely athletic, really good after the catch. So he's one guy. I mentioned Njoku and Evan Engram as possibilities. Freiermuth I'm kind of not in on because I think he was sort of another Knox-like guy as having that pumped up target or touchdown percentage. And his numbers as far as yards per reception and yards per target were pretty gross last year. And granted, that's with a washed up Ben Roethlisberger at quarterback, but are we really going to see that dramatic an improvement in QB play with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett? So, and Gesicki's actually a guy I didn't think I was going to be in on, but the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm intrigued by ways that Mike McDaniel might use him, and we saw Kittle become a star, and Gesicki's not. I don't think he's got the pure ability Kittle has. I mean, Kittle is probably the second hardest dude to tackle in the NFL after Derrick Henry, but Gesicki is really athletic, and I'm getting more and more intrigued by how he could be used in this offense, and I'm going to be looking for early training camp tidbits on him and how he's getting used in practices, and he might be a guy I wind up getting a little more of than I've been getting early in best ball.
Well, I think another guy that I'm also kind of interested in that is not sexy, and believe me, I'm going to say this and people are going to be like, okay, I'm unsubscribing, probably not listening to this podcast ever again, but has a clear path to targets, where there is not a lot of target competition in this offense whatsoever. He's a guy that has already shown that he can put up a lot of touchdowns year in and year out, and he's been consistent and is playing with a QB going into his second year that's only going to improve, that's Hunter Henry. Like, it's not a sexy pick whatsoever, but, Jacoby Myers had 51 more targets than any other player in that Patriots offense. And I'm not saying that Hunter Henry is going to be a top 5 tight end or anything, but I think he's someone that's sneaky because of like who's going to, grab targets from Hunter Henry? Jacoby Myers, Tyquan Thornton, Kendrick Bourne, like all solid players, but they don't have any like real alphas that's going to keep Hunter Henry from demanding a high target share. So that's something that'll be interesting to see as well, or even Jonnu Smith. But I know that, when you're playing with 2 tight ends like that, it's a little bit more sketchy, but we clearly saw Hunter Henry be the pass catching tight end and Jonnu Smith more the blocking tight end. But the last name that I want to cover, that I want to clip this so maybe I look like a hero at some point in my life. But Daniel Bellinger is the name that I'm looking in like late rounds. That is really interesting on the Giants. He's been running with the first team tight end in the Giants. We saw, the Brian Dable, use Dawson Knox, not a super high target share, but Daniel Bellinger is super, super athletic. We've heard a lot of really, really good things about him throughout OTAs, and he could be one of that surprise, like rookie tight end that, could sneak into something very early on in the season with a high role when he doesn't have a lot of target competition. Like, I don't think Kenny Golladay is going to demand a lot of targets. I love Kadarius Toney, but we don't know if he'll even be on the field. Sterling Shepard coming back from an Achilles. Daniel Bellinger is the one guy that is like super late in drafts. I mean, he's not even in the top 40 in ADP right now, that I think could be very interesting late in drafts. Have you heard of him yet?
I have, and really the only competition he's got at tight end is like Ricky Seals-Jones. So
exactly. Jordan Akins.
And Jordan Akins. Yeah, so the door is pretty wide open there. I like that call. Like out of all the rookie tight ends, I think he's probably got as much opportunity, if not more, than anyone, and that includes Trey McBride, who was thought to be, far and away the best prospect in this tight end crop.
100%. Before we get out of here, Pat, it's been wonderful having you on, but we have one more question for you. Your 2022 flag plant, your boldest prediction that you believe in, please give it to us, give it to the people, give it to D-Bro. Let us know your flag plant for this season.
Yeah, so I'm kind of been planting my flag on Breece Hall lately, and I think he could be. I think the upside is that he could be a top 5 running back this year, and. Wow. Yeah, man. I mean, just like this guy, he might not be quite the prospect that Saquon Barkley and Jonathan Taylor were, but like he is close. He's close to that. Like just 3 wildly productive years at Iowa State, then goes in and just lights up the combine. His jumps were incredible. His 40 time, I forget what his speed score is. I think like 98th, 99th percentile, something like that. And like good size. He catches passes, pretty much the total package here. And I think the Jets' offensive line is really underrated. I mean, especially if they can get more than like half a season out of Mekhi Becton. Yeah, I mean, D-Bro said it. Like, this is a really good run blocking O-line. The middle is fantastic with, Laken Tomlinson, Elijah Vera Tucker, and Connor McGovern. And, Fant and Becton could be a pretty good pair of tackles. Hopefully the Jets offense is improved overall and gives, plenty of touchdown opportunities to Hall. And, the key to that is Zach Wilson, obviously. But it really all comes down to how he's used, Alex. I mean, maybe he does fall into sort of a timeshare with Michael Carter. Maybe that's how the Jets roll to start. But maybe not. Maybe Carter is just becomes the Alexander Madison to Hall's Dalvin Cook, or maybe it starts as a timeshare, but Hall is so good right off the bat that the Jets say, look, man, we can't keep this guy off the field. We got to play him on passing downs too. So I think Hall is that good, and I think there's real upside here, and everyone's always got a little trepidation about the rookie running backs. Like they haven't seen these guys do it at the NFL level. So right now Hall has got like a 4th round ADP, and I'm kind of all over him in the 4th round, man, if I can get him there.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm with that on Breece Hall. And again, we've seen 9 out of the last 10 years. We've seen a top 15 rookie running back. We've seen a top 6 rookie running back in 4 of the last 5 years. The only year we didn't, Miles Sanders was 15th a few years ago. So we've seen it. And by historical precedent, even though that's just an arbitrary stat, like who else is going to do it? Dameon Pierce, Tyler Algier, is it going to be, someone like that. So I don't know. Maybe it'll be Julius Chestnut, from the Titans. I'm joking, obviously. But again, we've seen it year after year that these rookie running backs, tend to go up in ADP. And, they said that, Brees Hall is Batman and, Michael Carter might be Robin. And have we seen Robin in the last few Batman movies? No. So maybe he'll take a backup role and we'll see Brees Hall be the man. That'll be interesting to see. But obviously, I love Brees Hall, one of my favorite draft targets as well. But Pat, you're one of my favorite targets to get on the Fresh Fantasy Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you today. Before we go, you're working on a lot of great stuff at a really great company as well. So please tell us where we can find you, your company, and all your great work and rankings. One of the best rankers of all time. He's too humble to say it, but I'll say it for him.
Oh, man. Alex, my friend, it's always so good to talk to you. Love your work, love your show, and it's always great to be on and catch up with you. So people can find me on Twitter at Fitz_FF. They can find all of my stuff at FantasyPros. And, every week the Fitz on Fantasy podcast and the Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast. They can hear me that way. And, we just rolled out a really good redraft kit at Fantasy Pros. I mean, I think it is pretty darn comprehensive. Like, we've got just about everything you need, and the vast majority of it is free. There are a couple premium pieces, including my personal players to targets and players to avoid articles. So go check that out at Fantasy Pros, and that's it, man. Looking forward to following your work throughout the season, Alex.
I appreciate it. You're too kind. But again, I appreciate you, and to the listeners, we appreciate you for listening along with us, talking ball on this fine Wednesday afternoon. You guys will see this episode on Friday. But as always, Pat, it was amazing to have you, and the listeners, it was amazing to have you as well. But you guys already know, please leave a review. You guys already know what to do. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.